Hello YouTube, welcome back to my channel. So in today's tutorial we are going to go ahead and learn how to use Docker and Docker Compose to build to build our FastAPI application. So this FastAPI application is a to-do list application that we built a couple of months ago using FastAPI and MongoDB. So in today's tutorial we are going to use this application to build a Docker container using Docker and Docker Compose. So let's get started. So if you haven't tried this tutorial on how to create this API using MongoDB and FastAPI, then I'm going to leave the link in the description, or you can just click the card here up to access that video. So it's just a single video and you can access it and watch that video and learn how to build an API using FastAPI and MongoDB. So once you're done, we can now go ahead and actually put this in a Docker container and run it with a Docker Compose. Okay, so let's get started. The first thing we need to do is to clone this repository. So I'm going to go ahead and actually clone this repository. So let me copy this. I copy the link for the repository and I go into my terminal. So I'm going to make a directory here. I'm going to call it FastAPI to do, just like that. I'm going to call it FastAPI to do and press enter. So I'm going to change directory into my FastAPI to do. Okay, so I'm in that directory. You can see that directory has nothing inside of it. So the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to create a Python virtual environment. Well, to create a Python virtual environment is different from one operating system to the other. So if you're on Windows or MacBook, I will leave a link in the description on how to create a virtual environment for a specific operating system. In this case, I'm going to do it for Linux, and if you don't create a virtual environment, feel free to skip this step. So to create a virtual environment is quite very simple. What you have to do is simply have to type in Python 3 and then -m -m venv and then venv and then press enter. We're going to create this is going to create for us a virtual environment called env, and that's where we're going to install all our Python packages. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and actually check if the virtual environment is created, and yes, it's been created, and you can see the folder of that virtual environment here. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and actually activate that virtual environment. So env/bin/activate, okay, just like that, and it's going to activate my virtual environment. And you can know the virtual environment is activated when you can see the name of this virtual environment folder in parentheses in front of the line within the terminal. So great. Now that you have done creating the virtual environment, let's go ahead and actually create a folder called app. So I'm going to make and I'm going to call it app. Okay, just like that, and you can see we have that app folder in there. So I'm going to change the directory into my app folder, and in my app folder I'm going to clone my GitHub repository. So I'm going to say git clone, and then I'm going to paste the command that what I have copied from my GitHub repository, and I'm going to do space and then a dot. Okay, that means that I want to copy all of the folders into the app folder instead of creating another folder. So just going to press enter, and that is going to go ahead and actually clone that repository on our machine. So I'm going to clear the terminal, do an ls. You can see I have all that repositories in there. So I can go ahead. I'm going to navigate one directory back, and I'm going to go ahead and actually open Visual Studio Code. Okay, so I'm doing ls, and I'm going to open Visual Studio Code, or feel free to use any editor that you're using. So in case you haven't created a virtual environment until this point, is also fine. We can also install the Python packages within a global Python environment, in which I'm going to show you just in a second. So let's say wait for Visual Studio Code to open up. That my Visual Studio Code is ready and has opened up. So I'm just going to close this for now, and I'm going to go into my app, and in my app I'm going to move this into the root directory, the requirement.txt file. I'm going to move it into the root directory. I'm going to move the readme file into the root directory. I'm also going to move the git ignore into the root directory as well. So in our project, in our app directory, which is this app folder, we will have config, models, routes, schema, and then .main. Okay, which is just up to do with our application itself, and all the others I have moved them into the root directory. So I'm going to turn this into a Python package. So I'm going to say __ init _.py, just like that. Yeah, so once that is created, you can see it here. Now we need to go ahead and actually go and install all the Python packages for now. So I can clear my terminal for now, and I can do a Control and S, and you can see I have the requirement.txt folder. So I'm going to do pip. You can do pip3 install or pip. In Windows it says pip, in Linux you can use pip or pip3, it will also work. So install, but if you're on Windows, make sure it's pip3 install. I want to install -r and then requirements.txt, and I'm going to simply press enter. It's going to go ahead actually install all the requirements that we need for our project. Okay, so the requirements are we got this requirement when building the projects, so you can watch that video. As I said, the link is in the description, so you can see these are the requirements that we need to start our application. Okay, I'm not going to go ahead and explain to you how to create this application, since you've already done we are done with creating that application, right? It doesn't really make any sense to for me to show it again. The video is there, you can just watch the video, and the link is in the description. So you can see the requirements are all being installed, and once that's done, we can go ahead and actually begin to code. So all the requirements are done. You have installed FastAPI, you have installed PyMongo, you have installed UVCon and other stuff like that. So great. So now that you have done, let's try to run our application. So you have to say UVCon. Make sure that you are out of the app file, okay, of the app folder. Make sure that you're not inside of the app folders. Okay, make sure you're in the root directory, and then you have to say app.main, and then app.main, and then colon app. Okay, just like that. And then if you try to run this should start a development server. This should give us an error, and you can see the error here, and it has some import error. So let's go ahead and actually fix those import errors. So I'm going to go into my routes, and I'm going to go in here. Now this is going to be from one directory back, so you have to keep 1 2 because you're you have to keep 2 dots before 2 dots because you're importing this from one directory back. Also the config, you have to put 2 dots because you're importing this from one directory back. The same for the schemas, you have to put one directory back. Then you can go into our main.py. From routes, you're importing from the current directory. So let's check the other. Here we don't need any, we're not importing from any directory, so that's fine. And here also we're not importing from any directory, so that's also fine. So let's go ahead and actually try to run our app again, and to see if we get that error of the importation error. So let's run this again, and everything works. Okay, so you can just go to localhost at port 8000 and try this out. So you can go type in here localhost at port 8000, localhost colon 8000, just 8000 like this. Then you can press enter, and let's see what we get. We get back an internal server error. So let's check what the error is all about. So the error is about our authentication field. The reason why our authentication field is because this is not my password, right? So I have to keep my actual password, and my password is code with prince. Okay, this I just changed the password for now, and after the tutorial I will change my password, so don't use my password. Okay, it will be changed. So make sure that you have Atlas already installed, and again, if to understand the root of this project, make sure that you go back and watch the previous tutorial. Okay, so now that you have done, I'm going to just exit out of this, clear the terminal, and start my development server again, since I didn't use the reload flag. Okay, so I'm going to now make a request, and now you can see back, I get back the responses. So if I do /docs, it should take me to the docs, and I can see the FastAPI Swagger UI documentation. So that shows that everything is set up and everything is working great. So now I want to do some changes to this. I want to go and do some little modifications to my application. So I want to go in here, I want to open a new tab, and I want to search for .env Python. So search for .env Python. So just go to pypy.org, and just click on Google, and make sure it brings you to this website. And I want to install this .env because I want to use an environment variable on a .env file. So I'm going to close my server, and then paste that command to install the requirements, that requirement right there. So it's going to install the it's going to install for us python.env. Okay, once that's installed, I'm just going to now make sure that I update my requirement file, because I just installed a new library. Since this is the last library we're going to install, so I just update my requirements .txt file. So great. So now that we have that in there, I'm going to create a .env file right here. So I'm going to create .env just like that, and I'm going to go into my database, and I'm going to copy all of this code right here. I'm going to copy all of this, make sure I cut it out, and then I'm going to go into .env, and I'm going to create database _connection _ URL, and this is going to be equals to what you have just got from there. And again, the strings are not like using double quotes is not compulsory. You can decide to leave the double quotes out, but I'm just gonna leave it in there. So go back to the official documentation of .env. You can see what we need to do right now. We need to go ahead and actually import this. So we need to import this. I'm going to go copy this and just paste it here. So make sure I just exit out of that, paste it in here. So I'm going to do, okay, I hit Control V instead of Control C instead of Control V. So I'm going to go ahead and actually paste that one more time, and then I'm going to go ahead and actually copy this part. It is just going to be a config. Copy that, and this is going to return to us a dictionary of all the secret keys and other password and other settings from the config file. So I'm just going to do config.get since a dictionary, and I'm going to get this specific variable here. So I'm going to copy this, and then move it in here. So paste that in there. So I'm just going to, no, I didn't copy it properly, so let me just go back here and I'm make sure that I copy it properly. So I'm just bring this here, URL. I'm going to copy that, and I'm going to come in here and I'm going to paste it in there. Yeah, so it's going to get us that URL, which is going to get us this specific configuration. Okay, so now this is going to be a secret key because it contains my password, so I don't want to push this to GitHub. So I'm going to ignore this by putting .env, and it's going to ignore that specific file when I push it to GitHub. So once that's done, let's try to run our application again to make sure everything is working. So it is going to bring down that command, clear the terminal, make sure I run the right command. So I'm going to say uvcon and then run the command again, and then we can try this out again on my my local machine. So I try it out and everything still works. So great. So now that you have that set up, let's go ahead and actually write a Docker file to dockerize our Flask application, our simple Flask application. So that's what you need to do. You need to create a file called Dockerfile. So just let me just close everything for now, minimize everything. In the root directory, just create a file called Docker file. Make sure that is capital D and everything is small letter afterwards. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is to import a Python image. So I'm going to say Python, and I'm going to say I'm going to get Python 3.9.7. okay, I'm going to get Python 3.9.7, and then what I'm going to do, I'm going to create a working directory. So I'm going to say work dir, and the work dir is going to be /users. Make sure it's lowercase, /users, /source, / and then / I'm going to say application. Okay, so let me just explain to you this just in a second. So you can see /users /source, this directory already exists. So you can read the Docker official documentation and you notice that this directory already exists. So I'm creating a new directory inside of the source directory. I'm going to call it application, and that's where we're going to install our application. So now what I need to do, I'm going to copy my requirements. I'm going to copy my requirements.txt file, and I'm going to copy it into the working directory, which is going to be the current directory. That's I have to do full stop and then /. So I'm copying the requirement.txt, which is this requirements file, and make sure that you've already updated the requirements file before doing this. That's why I updated it previously. So we are copying the requirements.txt file into the current working directory, and the current working directory is users /source /application. So once that's done, what I'm going to do right now, I'm going to go ahead and actually specify a command. So this command is going to be the run command. You're going to say pip install. I'm going to install no catch, and I'm going to say no catch the, and this is going to be going to say -r requirements.txt. I'll make sure I get txt and then text. Okay, so now that's done, we can go ahead and actually copy everything from the current directory on our local machine into the working directory on the Docker container. So you're copying everything, which is going to be everything here. You're copying into the current working directory in our Docker container, and the working directory is users /source /application. Once that's done, we can go ahead and actually run the command. So one thing I want to explain to you is, you can see that I have, first of all, I copied the requirement.txt file, and then I did the installation. So I did this part before copying all the other folders into my working directory on my Docker container. The reason for this is that everything else from here consists of your app also, and your app you might make changes from time to time. If you make changes from time to time, doesn't mean that you want to install the libraries from scratch again every time you want to run your Docker container. So that's why you have to make sure that you install everything before copying this. This is because Docker has a caching system. So if you put this code above it, if you put this code above, if you put it maybe somewhere here, then every time you make changes to your application, Docker will detect that change. So Docker will start make sure it copies all the files and installs everything again from scratch. So that is going to take you time, and that's not what you want to do in most cases. What you want to do is that you want to copy the requirements TXT file and then install everything and then copy all the file, meaning that even in the future, if your files here change, what would and if your application file changes and your requirements files remain the same, then what Docker will do, Docker will just start from here due to it has already cached all these other parts. So what it will do, it will just copy all everything from the current all the changes into the current working directory without necessarily having to install all these packages again. So once that's done, I hope that's clear for you. So make sure that you follow this specific order just to save time whenever you are running a Docker application. So I'm going to do a command, and this command is going to be as follows. So I'm going to say this command is going to be the same command that you have been using in the terminal. So if I bring back my terminal and I show the command that you have been using to run an application, it's uvcon appmin.this command that we're going to specify here. So each word is going to be in its own quotes, and this one will be in its own quotes like that. So I'm just going to say you know that you can also use let me just create a terminal. You can also use -- reload just like that, and that will still work, and Docker will reload the FastAPI will reload whenever you make changes. So I'm going to say uvcon and then space and then another make sure I keep a comma here, and then you have to say app.main and then app, you want the app. And then what you want to do, I want to say I can specify the host also. I can say dash, I can say -- host. You're going to run this on localhost at port. I'm going to write this on all. It means that it can accept all IP addresses. That's why I'm saying 0.0.0, and then you have to say I'm going to specify a port. So port on which this is going to run on, my Docker application is going to run on, and the port is going to be port 8000. So we're going to run this on port 8000, and it's going to accept running on all IP addresses. So that's all we need to run out to create a simple Docker container. So now that we have created Docker container, we can run this Docker container manually just by ourselves, or you can create a Docker file, Docker compose file to run it. So let's try to see how we can run this manually. So I'm just going to clear this. I'm going to do sudo, and if you're on Windows, you don't have to do sudo. And one thing before you get into this Docker section, make sure that you have Docker installed on your computer, and also have Docker compose installed on your computer. Okay, so these are the two things that you must have: Docker and Docker compose installed. Okay, and if you're on Windows, feel free to skip this sudo. Okay, sudo is from a MacBook, and guys who are using Linux, and yeah, so if you're on Windows, feel free to skip the sudo thing. Okay, so you're going to say build, and you're going to say that's T. If you want to say build, you can do the -- and help, and then you can see all the help options that you have using the build command. So I'm going to put in my password. So with my password in, I can see the different flags that I want to use, but the flag that I'm interested in this time is going to be the T flag. So I'm going to use the T flag for that. So I'm going to clear the terminal. I'm going to do sudo docker build, and I'm going to say -t. I'm going to call this FastAPI, and to do, and then I'm going to run this from our current directory. It means our current directory is going to look through, and it's going to file this Docker file. So make sure you're in the root directory where the Docker file can be found. Okay, so I'm going to now press enter, and this is going to go ahead and actually build my Docker container, Docker image basically. So you can see it's going ahead to build this. So this is going to take a bit of time, so I'm going to be back when this is completely done. so guys, I'm back and you can see that it has successfully installed that created that Docker image. So let's try to see all the existing Docker image. So I'm going to do sudo I'm going to do sudo docker, and I'm going to do image ls. So it's going to show us the list of all the existing Docker images on my machine right now. So one of the images that we expect to do is a FastAPI application right here. So you can see that FastAPI image has been created. So great. So now that we have that created, let me just create a terminal for now, and I can go ahead and actually do Sudo Docker Run, and then I can run this. I'm going to run it in a detached mode. So if you do -- help, you can see all the help options. So you can run this in you can specify the let me just scroll up here. So you can specify the port on which to run on. You can specify you can run it on detached mode, using the detached mode. So you're going to use the detached mode, which is the D flag. You're also going to specify the port using the P flag. So I'm going to clear the terminal, and I'm going to do sudo sudo docker run, and I'm going to do it in detached mode. Detached mode, and I'm going to specify the port on which this to run on. So I'm going to specify port. I'm going to say 8000 colon and then 8000, just like this. Let me just do 8000 again. So what this specifically means that on the local machine, so this specify the port on the local machine, and on the local machine you specify that on the Docker container, rather you specify that the application should run on port 80. So now on our local machine, which is the current computer that I'm running on, I want also to open port 80 and connect port 80 on my local machine to port 80 on the Docker container. Okay, and then I want to specify the name. I can just say FastAPI to do just like that, and then I can simply press enter, and this is going to go ahead and start that FastAPI for us. So this is going to get started, and it's going to connect port 8000 on our local machine, which is the current computer on, with port 8000 on the Docker container. This is the port on which the Docker the FastAPI application runs. So let's check this out to make sure that it's all working. So I'm in my browser right now. I can just do another refresh again to see if I can get that response. So you can see I can get I can get it again, and you can see it all works. So even if I try to do, I can go ahead and try this out, and I can go and execute this. You can see I'm supposed to get some to do here because I've added some to do. So you can see it all works. So now that we have that working, means that our Docker container is running. So I can go ahead and actually do a sudo docker compose ps. So I can do sudo docker docker ps. So I can do a ps, and you can see it's running on, this is the information of the running Docker container. You can see this is the information, and it's running on our local machine. So not the name of the Docker container here. So you can the name of the Docker container is this part. The name of the Docker container, the name of the Docker image rather. So let's check the name of the Docker image, which is FastAPI. So let's go ahead and try to stop this Docker from running. So I'm going to sudo docker again. If you're on Windows, and make sure that you don't use the sudo. So just say docker, and then say stop, and then you're going to specify the name of the Docker image. So the name of the Docker image is this one here. So I'm just gonna copy that. The name of the Docker image is this one right here. So I'm going to copy that, and then I'm going to go ahead and paste it here, and then press enter. This is going to go ahead and actually stop that Docker image for us. So this is the name of the Docker image. It is usually at the end and has this name. So if you do it again, sudo docker ps, you can see that we don't have any running image. So great. So now that you have stopped that Docker image, this is tedious to do, to repeat these commands all the time that you want to run a Docker container. So let's go ahead and actually do this using a Docker compose file, which is a better and a much preferred way of running Docker containers. So let's go ahead and do that. So in the terminal, I'm going to create a Docker. I'm going to call it Docker hyphen Docker hyphen, and this is going to be Docker hyphen, I'm going to call it Docker hyphen compose.yaml. I'm going to create a YAML file, so docker compose YAML. So inside of this file, what we need to do, we need to create a version. So I need to create a Docker version that you want. So version, I'm going to use version 3. So now that you specify the version of the Docker compose that you want to use, now let's go ahead and create a service. So I'm going to create Docker compose has this thing called services. So I'm going to create a service to run our application. So I'm going to call this service API. And that's simple. Make sure that after every line you do a tab. So after every line you do a tab, just to to show indentation. So the service, the API is under services, so you have to do indentation to show that. And under services you're going to have build, and you're going to build it from the current directory. And then for now we're going to go ahead and actually specify the port. So I'm going to say ports, and I'm going to specify the port as an array. So you can provide in an array, you can provide in an array here just like this, or you can provide in by using this specific syntax. So this syntax you can use is going to be let me just tab this. So it's going to be this hyphen, and then we specify port 8000 to port 8000, just like that. So I want port 8000 because port this is for the local machine, and this is for the which local machine is my computer, and then this is for the Docker container image or Docker container. Okay, so that's basically what you need to do. So now once we have that, you can go ahead and actually run this Docker compose file. Okay, so what you have to do is say Docker compose, and then you have to Docker compose app, and then you have to run it in a detached mode, just like they will run the Docker container. So I'm going to now clear all of this, and I'm going to do sudo docker hyphen compose, and make sure that you have Docker compose installed on your machine, or this won't work. So Docker compose, and I'm going to run it in a detached mode. You can also do hyphen help in case you need help with the option. To see what options you have, you can do Docker compose hyphen help, and that will provide you the help option. So you can see the Docker compose help option is here. So now you can read through it and see what you want to do. So what else we want interested in is to do Docker compose app to create to start our Docker container. So I'm going to click the terminal, do sudo docker hyphen compose, and I'm going to do compose, and I'm going to do app, and I'm going to run this in a detached mode. So I'm going to specify the D flag and then run this. This is going to start my Docker compose container in a detached mode. So I just have to wait for this to start, and you can see it's creating that it's creating the network, and then building the API and stuff like that. It's building our service basically because the API is one of the services that we have in here. So just have to wait for this. Let me go back to the terminal and see the progress of this. So just have to wait for this to get done, and then we can continue with our video. So guys, you can see my Docker compose already build the Docker image. So you can see that the name of that image is FastAPI to-do underscore API underscore 1. So it takes the name of your folder which you're working on. So you're working in this folder, a root directory, or the folder in which the Docker compose file is found, and then the underscore, the name of the service, and then underscore 1, since you're building only one service. Okay, that's why it's saying underscore 1. So great. So now that we have that the Docker image is already created and it's running, so we can just go ahead and try to check if it's running. So let me just make a try to execute this and see if it's running. So I'm just make a request, and you can see it's running. So even if I just try this out and I try to execute this, we get back our list of all to do. So you can see it works perfectly. So you can even make, if you have time, you can go ahead and try to create a new, and then post the data if you want. Let me just try this out, and then I'm just going to post this random data, and it's going to post it. So even if I get back here and I do get all, and you can see I have that to do here. So you can see it all works fine. So great. Now that we have that, let's go ahead. I'm going to go into my app, and I'm going to go into main. So instead of main here, I'm going to go into main here, and I'm going to go let me just go into my routes, and I'm going to go into to do. So in this to do, instead of returning all these to do's, let's just make a change. Instead of, let's return a simple, I'm going to say message, and I'm going to say hello world. Okay, just save that, and then I can go back here to the front end, and I can try to execute this. It's supposed to return to us hello world instead of the list of but it still returns to us the list of to-dos. So why is the change not being reflected? Well, by creating an image, it doesn't keep track of these changes that you make in a file. It means that if ever you want to keep track of these changes, you have to go to the terminal, and then let me just clear this, and I'm going to do sudo docker compose docker hyphen compose down. So I'm going to now bring that my Docker image down. So once it's going to bring it down, what you notice is that it doesn't keep track of all these changes. So how do we make that how do we make sure that it keep track of all these changes? For you to keep track of all these changes, you have to rebuild the Docker image for this to work. So you have to go ahead and actually specify the rebuild for the Docker image to work. If I take you back to the terminal, and you can see that you can specify that by saying here Docker compose build or Docker compose app build -- build. So you have to rebuild your image in this manner, okay, for this to keep track of, to reflect the current changes that you have. So how do we make sure that it's Docker automatically detects these changes, right? So let's just come up here. So I'm just going to go to Docker compose and app. I'm just going to try to run this again, and let's see what is going to happen. So I'm just going ahead and building my image again. So I'm just going to make go to the front end, refresh this, and then I'm going to go ahead and actually make a request again. So let's see what it happens this time. So I'm going to go refresh this again. So it says that let me just see, let me just come here, Docker compose this, it says done, but it doesn't if you try to make the request, we get an error. Okay, now it's working. I don't know why that was happening. So let me just go ahead and try to try this out again, and then make a request. Let's see what is going to return to us. It's going to return to us a list of all these to-dos. So we get back a list of all these to do. So meaning that for us, for this list to reflect, you have to rebuild the Docker image again from scratch. So you have to now do a Docker, and then you have to say app, and then -- build again, and this is going to go ahead as the command here suggests, is going to go ahead and build that Docker image again. And when that Docker image is built, that's when we'll be able to see these changes. So let me just go ahead and actually rebuild this one more time, and then I'll show you something. So let's just wait for this to be built, and when it's built, I'll be back. So guys, you can see that the Docker image is built and is running in an interactive mode. So one thing you can see that whenever you come in and look closely, you can see that I copy the requirement.txt file is using the cache, right? So it's, even if we want to install all the requirement, it's using the cache because the requirement file didn't change. And then later I copied everything and then did all the copying. So that's why I told you that you have to specify the order in order. I explained this to you earlier, right? Where we specify copy dot after this other copying of the file and other installations, right? Because Docker by default using caching, which saves us a lot of time during rebuilding of our Docker containers. So now once this is done, let's try to refresh this. I'm just going to be refreshing this, and I'm going to try this out, and I'm going to execute this. This is going to return to me just a simple hello world as expected. So now the Docker image is built. So every time you make changes, you have to rebuild this, and this takes a couple of time. So how do we make sure that we automatically keep track of this? So we have to create what is called a bind mount. Okay, a bind mount, we have to create something called a bind mount, and a bind mount you have to create a volume, a bind mount volume. Okay, so it's a volumes, and then you have to specify the current directory, meaning that on the local host, the Docker should work out for changes in the local host, and these changes should be updating so user, so it'll be user /source / application, just like that. And you want to do this in only read only mode, so because Docker can only read the file and not write it, so that this is for security reason, because it doesn't make sense that Docker application will be writing your files, right? You usually do not do that. We only read the file from here, and that's why I specify RO, which is read only. So once this Docker container is set up, let's go ahead and actually rebuild. The volume is set up. Let's exit this. I'm going to exit this, and then let's go ahead and do a Docker down, and then I'm going to bring that Docker, and I'm going to rebuild it again with this volume. Okay, with this volume will help us to keep track of all the changes. And let's wait for this to drop to bring down this Docker container, and then we'll rebuild this container again. So once that is done, I'm going to do a Docker app again. I'm going to rebuild this, and I'm going to run it in interactive mode. So I'm going to run it in detached mode. So, okay, I'm going to run this in detached mode, and this is going to create now the Docker file again from the scratch. So let's wait for this to get created. So now once you're done, you're done rebuilding this Docker container again, and you're running it in interactive mode. So let me just go ahead and see if we didn't actually make any changes. So let's see if you keep track of changes. So let's go ahead and let me go to routes. Okay, I'm going to routes, and then hello world. Let's say this is code width. I'm just code width. Just say prints, just like that. So this is code with prints. Okay, now that you have a bind mode running and a bind mode volume, let's try to run this again, and it simply just simply returns a simple hello world. It means that it does not keep track of the changes despite of having a bind mode. Okay, does it really keep track of the changes? Let's find out. So I'm just going to create a terminal, and I'm going to type in this command so we can go into the Docker container. So sudo docker, and then I'm going to say this execute, and then I'm going to execute it in interactive mode, IT mode, and then I'm going to say FastAPI and to do underscore API underscore 1, which is the name of the Docker service that we want, Docker container, and then you want to say bash. We need to go into the bash terminal of this Docker container. So let's run this, and then let's see if you're able to get access to the bash terminal of our Docker. So we are in, and then I can do an ls. You can see I have these files in here. So let me just change directory into my app, and then do an ls. I'm going to change directory into routers. So and then let me change let me just do a nano. I'm just cut this, and then to do, and then we can see that. Let's scroll up here, and then let's see if it keeps track of the change. So you can see hello world, this is code with print. So let's go back ahead. Let me make some changes here. This is print code with maybe let me just remove prints for now, and then let me save this, and then I go back to the Docker container. I run that command again, and then let me scroll up to this section here. Where is it? It's up here. So you can see code with prints still exists. So it says code with prints, despite of us deleting code with prints. I should reflect these changes. Let me see if it does again. Let me see if it reflects those changes. Yeah, so you can see it reflects those changes. You say hello world, this is code with, and there's no prints. So the files in our Docker container, on our Docker container image change, but it doesn't reflect the change on the web application. So if I do a get here, I still get back hello world. And this reason why is this happening, the reason why this is happening is because we didn't if I go back to Docker file, we didn't specify the reload flag, meaning that if there's any change, then our application won't reload. And this is very logical because we're running this on a Docker container. We don't expect the Docker container to make changes unless we make those changes. So how do we override this to make sure that our app restarts automatically? Now we can do this in two ways. You can keep the reload flag here, meaning that whenever the files change, then it will reload start the FastAPI application all over again. But we don't want that, and we can override that using in this command. So what we can do here, we can override that in by specifying the command attributes. So what you can do is just have to say that command, and just pass in the command. So say command, and the command is going to be you have to say uvcon and then app.main. Let me show you the spelling, app.main, and then we want to get app, and then we want to say hyphen host is going to be 0.0.0.0. then you have to specify the hyphen and specify the port, and the port is going to be at localhost at port 80,000. So great. And then you have to specify now the reload flag, which is down the hyphen reload. So this command here is going to override the command from here. So this is going to override this right here. Okay, so this one we can do it, or we can also specify the reload flag here if you want, but Docker images specifically do not have changes, so it's better just to keep in a Docker compose file, and that's why I'm doing it this way. So everything is fine. So now we just have to now bring back our Docker, bring down our Docker compose. So I'm going to exit out of this, and then I'm going back to my normal terminal, and I'm going to do sudo docker compose down, just like that. I'm going to bring that Docker image, and then I'm going to now bring it up again to see if those changes take place. So now that my Docker compose is down, let me just do it again. Docker compose sudo docker compose. Should I get that spelling right? I'm going to say app, and I'm going to write this in a detached mode, and I'm going to press enter, and this is going to start my Docker again. So let's go ahead and let's wait for this to start, and once this is created, we can go ahead and choose to see if it keeps track of those changes. So I'm going to go in here, and then I'm going to go to my developments, my API, make a request, and let's see what we get back. We should get back just a simple hello world as expected. So great. And let me just go back to my this file here, and I'm going to change it so that you can, let's say prints, just like that. And I'm going to go back in here, wait for a while, and then let's try to make a request again. Let's see if it keeps track of those changes and restart this file. Yeah, you can see it keeps track of those changes and restarts the server. So now I'm going to return this. I'm just going to remove this, and we simply return my to do, and then to do's. Okay, once that's done, we can just go back in here and then wait a bit of while and then do a request again, and now that should now return for us all our to do. So now our docker image is now keeping in track of this and being in a sync being in sync with our local machine. So whatever changes we make to application, it will automatically update and keep track of those changes. So guys, that's all for this tutorial, and I hope that this gives you a basic foundation of how Docker works and how you can use Docker Compose to run your Docker images. So guys, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial so far. If you did, give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my YouTube channel for more videos like this. See you in the next one. Keep safe.